Hey, I want to tell you about Moto Brand. Moto Brand was founded during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic when the sport that we live for was taken from so many of us, whether it's cycling or moto. Waking up on a Saturday morning knowing that your local track was closed, there would be no Supercross, and for many of us that we couldn't even hit our favorite local riding spot or trail with our crew. We are forced to be reminded of how much the sport of moto and cycling truly means to us. Moto Brand represents a collection of individuals that not only ride, but live to ride. It's what we think of at all times of the day, and sometimes at a detriment to your relationship with your significant other. It's for those that look at their motorcycle or their bicycle as part of their identity. Maybe it's the way that you bond with your son or your daughter or your spouse. Perhaps it's your way to blow off stress of your day job, or even, hey, it is what it is, maybe even it's your marriage. This sport is more than just a sport. For many of us, it's a way of life. It's what keeps us ticking. It's what keeps us living. Moto Brand was created for a purpose, to be more than just a shirt that you can throw on in the morning, but these designs represent who you are and what you stand for. So I encourage you to head over to themotobrand.com, check out our collection. We have a pedal collection and we have a throttle collection, and there are more designs to come that stand for something. So head over to themotobrand.com and we'll see you there.
I want to tell you about something special that RacerX is doing right now. If you go to racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing, be sure to use our link. You can subscribe and get the Nationals box. This is pretty exciting. Check this out. They have the 2020 Pro Motocross Souvenir Program, print plus digital RacerX magazine subscription. So you get the traditional magazine as well as right to your phone or to your computer. You get the Marty Smith cover poster, 2020 Lucas Oil Pro Motocross sticker, and the 2020 Lucas Oil Pro Motocross t-shirt, and a pretty sweet little collector's national box that it comes in, all for the $50 subscription. You get all that. Pretty sweet. Be sure to go to racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing and get all the swag.
Hey, big shout out to our friends at FMF. Little D and the guys are always doing some pretty exciting things, not just with the performance products, but man, they've got the coolest apparel in the game, and I want to give you guys an opportunity to get that at a little bit of a discount. If you go to FMF and pick up any gear you'd like, hats, shirts, whatever it is, upon checkout, if you enter the code MMP30, MMP30, you can get 30% off. So MMP30 at checkout and get 30% off your order on FMF apparel.
Welcome to the Moto Marketing Podcast, presented by RacerX, the podcast for moto industry professionals, entrepreneurs, and riders. If you want to grow your brand and business in today's digital-first world, you have to know how to turn a stranger into a fan, turn a like into a customer. You have to know how to turn attention into dollars. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you in the know on real marketing tactics that work in the moto world so that you grow your business and help grow the sport. Get ready to learn from the very same marketing experts trusted by RacerX, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, GNCC, and NBC Sports. They'll help you navigate the world of digital marketing for your moto brand. This is the Moto Marketing Podcast. Presented by RacerX.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Moto Marketing Podcast. I am your host, Luke Nesler. We've got a special guest with us today. We have Beth Paretta. She is the U.S. Race Fuel Sales Manager for ETS Racing. Right off the top, we were just talking before we came on, for everybody to understand ETS, I mean, some of the biggest names that we know in moto utilize ETS race fuels. You're talking Marvin Musquin, Cooper Webb, Road to a Championship, Zach Osborne, Jordan Smith when he was with KTM, and then overseas you have Tim Geiser, Glenn Coldenhoff, Yargo Geertz, just to name a few. So ETS is a high performance company, and Beth, the reason I was excited to have you come on today is we've talked about this before the show. You've got a rich history in not only marketing, but in the four-wheel power sport space. And you're doing a lot with US Race Fuels in the two-wheel space now as well.
Right.
And just your mind, your marketing mind and your business mind from what you've learned from the four-wheel space can only help a brand like ETS Race Fuels in the two-wheel space. So welcome to the show. I'm excited for the guests to learn about you and to dive into to the brand.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate being with you. So ETS Racing Fuels, there's so many people that use the fuel in North America and nobody knows it. So part of the strategy in the beginning was to really, on the professional side, it was in the two-wheel space. So because we have developed our fuels with KTM for the moto market, literally working with Roger DeCoster and his team, and therefore the KTM and Husqvarna teams have used our fuel for years. When the company ETS wanted to grow the business in North America, the place to start was in the two-wheel market because it was already here. The first step was just to let people know that it was already here. So the person knew it. A lot of amateurs and even just a weekend warrior didn't really know about it. So the first step had been really just to kind of peel back, kind of pull back the curtain and let people know that we've been fueling these teams for many years, and if it's good enough for them, it's certainly other fuels that we make would be good enough for an amateur rider. So that was the first step.
Absolutely. So I want to take a step back and talk about your background. You had just said before we hit record, you could rattle off every name for the last 50 years in Formula One.
Right.
And now you're taking that knowledge and integrating or making somewhat of a transition into working with high performance athletes in the two-wheel space, as well as trying to get these products that these top athletes use to the weekend warrior. There's so many things that four-wheel racing does, and sometimes, and most of the times, does better than two-wheel racing. What are some of the things that you have brought from that background of Formula One and everything you've been into, helping maybe grow the ETS brand name in America in the two-wheel space? Right.
So racing in general, the business has changed everywhere. And I don't know, I mean, we probably have to do a little bit of research to kind of figure out where it started to shift. And it's not necessarily shifting for the better, but the reality is motorsport as a business is very much marketing driven. Years and years ago, it was very much engineering driven. You had if you're working for a major car company or motorcycle company, usually it was the engineers that were sort of steering the decisions, figuring out what series you were going to race in. Because certainly in a car company, you might have more choices. Are you in NASCAR? Are you in sports car? Are you in Formula One? Mm-hmm. And those decisions had to do more with engineering decisions of what do we need to develop for the road, and therefore which racing series is the best fit for that set of goals. But goodness, probably in, I'd say the 80s to 90s, at least in the four-wheel space, and this is where I'll diverge and kind of just go from where my experience is, because I'm newer to the two-wheel space, and so I can't speak to the history as well, but I fully admit that, is the shift to it being marketing driven and everything being funded by marketing. And in fairness, why that happened was two reasons: that costs just started to rise. And when companies looked at those decisions, they, yes, you are getting engineering feedback, but it was like, well, is it the best? And then the best method to get that feedback, because realistically, a lot of racing still to this day is kind of like a lab.
Right.
Way to, and there are a lot of things that are in road cars that started literally. One of the things that people like to say is the rear view mirror was invented at Indianapolis Motor Speedway in one of the first IndyCar races. And it was because meaning in like the early 1900s and like that then make their way to cars. And that happened for many years, anti-lock braking systems. And, the kind of the germ of the idea started in racing and it transferred. So a lot of car companies, et cetera, could justify the expense and the effort based on, what would go to the road cars on the engineering side. Later on, when expenses went up, it was like, okay, well, let's see if we can also get advertising out of this. And so most of your decisions were then based on the advertising for the car company or the motorcycle company. But then again, with costs rising, that's when you're into having, being all logoed up. And, seriously, anybody that works in racing and has for years, one of our favorite movies is still Talladega Nights, because the idea of, Ricky Bobby thanking his sponsors at dinner. That's not far from the truth. So for that reason, because the expenses were so high and the need to fund the endeavor became so astronomical, you couldn't justify it out of your engineering spend. So you had to get that sort of extra value, which was out of the marketing side. And so my background, prior to working for ETS, I do have my own race team, which is an initiative for education for kids. But before that, professionally, I worked at Fiat Chrysler, and I was the director of the SRT brand, which is the performance brand, street racing technology. So the Viper, the Challenger SRT, Charger SRT, Jeep, at the time, Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT. And with that job came also managing all of motorsports. It's often the case at a car company. If you're the performance division, you're also the racing. You kind of go hand in hand because, again, you've got the overlap of engineers. So in that role, I oversaw the NASCAR program, sports car, Trans Am, and in especially with the Viper, it was developing the production car sort of well on its way, but then having to develop the race car in parallel, and then bring it to the grid. And then for all the money that you're spending to develop this race car, I mean, to put it in perspective, those cars, we ran 2 of them. The cars cost a little over $1 million a piece. Wow. And we're running 2 of them. And the reason for that is because there were only 2 of them. You don't get those economies of scale. You're not buying something off the shelf. You're literally working with somebody that's making it, tooling it. And then when you crash it, you've got to rebuild it. So you try to figure out, you're not going to get a ton of engineering transfer there. So what's the other thing that you can get? Marketing value, which is why, when you look on any of like your moto riders and, they can have the name of a hotel on the side, right. And, but that side of the business, to then find that sponsorship, because it's one thing to go to, let's say Hilton Hotels and have Hilton on your arm, or have Red Bull on your hat. But what does Red Bull get out of it? What does Hilton Hotels get out of it? And that part of the business is integral to the success of the team, having good sponsors, maintaining them, ideally that they're coming back year after year, because it makes it easier to, keep a partner that you have, and then instead go out and, all of a sudden Hilton didn't feel like they got value. Now I've got to go out and knock on the door of Marriott. But so that maintaining of the sponsorship, I mean, anyone who's running a race team will tell you that's as important as your crew chief. Because that's the money tree. I mean, yes, a factory team, like a KTM factory team, I ran the factory team. The factory pays, but anything you can have to subsidize it just makes it more worthwhile. And sadly, as I said, like in the 4-wheel space, like Formula One, whatever, you saw a big shift when costs start going up. All of a sudden, marketing becomes kind of trumps engineering.
What are some of the ways that in this, I mean, this can be 2 wheels or 4 wheels. What are some ways 4 wheels doing it better than 2? Your product is invisible to the person watching. Yeah. And we've had some other guests on the show that their products aren't visible. We had a knee brace company that their product is literally underneath of the Fox Racing, the Fly, the FXR gear.
What do you do for fuel?
How do you communicate to the fan, the person that you're trying to get them to buy that product on the weekend, that people like Cooper Webb and Marvin and Zach Osborne are utilizing this product beyond just hoping that they make it on the podium and they see that patch on their shoulder, on their jersey? What are some ways you guys are communicating that, hey, our product is in this machine, fueling it to victory?
We have to do a better job of that. And one of the things that is unique about our relationship with ETS, so just as a quick background, ETS is made in France. It originally was Esso Technology and Services. It was a division of Esso. So you guys know it as ExxonMobil in the US. Everywhere rest of the world it's called Esso. It was a sort of a offshoot where basically every major fuel company, if they have a racing division, the fuel is made in a separate space, and it would be made in the stuff that you get at the corner gas station. So it then became independent, and now we're owned by a large petrochem out of Germany. So the fuel that these guys are using, literally when you go to your local track, you see them in Salt Lake or wherever, that was flown in or on a ship, brought in from France. Fuel, 2 things. Fuel matters. Why does it matter, or why can it give somebody an edge? A couple of things that we are certainly known for. When we developed it with KTM, or when we develop it, we have customers in other major racing series around the world. in the moto space specifically, what you're looking at is reacceleration, because you've got a lot of sort of, through a lap, you look at how much variance there is between how fast you're going, how slow you're going, and then how much you have to reaccelerate out of a corner, et cetera. And that reacceleration, sort of the burn rate of the fuel, is what's going to be, the fuel profile will differ there. And ideally, you want to have the right mix of acceleration, but also efficiency, right? Because you want to be able to not burn as much fuel and be able to go longer on more fuel. But the other thing that's important is what temperature, that you want to make sure that you're running cool, especially when you're in a middle of summer. Now you're out at a moto event, you're worried about things like vapor lock. So the fuel has been specifically blended to make sure that it can run a little bit cooler, so that that's not an issue. And then the last thing, which is probably the most important thing, is consistency. You want to know that keg after keg that you open up, that it's going to be the same combination and mix, so that it's reliable, that you can, ideally, if you are a pro team, you don't even want to have to worry about the fuel. You want to know that when you're there, it's going to do everything that you need it to, and you never have to think about it. Where we have an interesting situation with KTM is they actually buy the fuel. We don't have a sponsorship agreement with them. So they're paying for the fuel. They could probably get other competitors, other fuel companies' fuel for a discount or for free, and they choose to use ours because of the performance that it gives them. And that, of course, is a huge endorsement. Tough thing, though, is then I've got Cooper Webb up on a podium without an ETS patch. So
because they're paying for it. So I got you.
Right. So if we had an agreement, then he would be in his post-race interview saying, "I want to thank ETS Racing Fuels." So because we don't have that relationship, and it's literally just a product that that they are using, but we don't have the sponsorship agreement, you're not hearing about us as much. We're in talks with them to kind of figure out, where that might go. But the nice thing too is, even though it is something that you can't see, as soon as a pro rider were to tell you about how one fuel differs from another, then that's kind of how you get the story across. Because one thing I will say, although you can't see fuel, and you can buy our fuel at etsracingfuels.com, and you can actually buy it online and have it shipped to your house, your shop, a local track. But one thing that's great about something like this is it's tangible, in the sense that you're going to either feel that it works or it doesn't. So I can tell you that it's great, but don't take my word for it. You can try it and actually feel it, and you'll probably feel a change in acceleration right out of the gate. The throttle response you're going to feel immediately. So the fact that it's something that you might not be able to see, but you can kind of feel it when you're riding, that's helpful, because it's not just don't take my word for it, try it. And
right.
It's kind of nice when you have a product like that.
So ever since I was a kid, the fuel that we have no affiliation with this brand. I've seen them since I was a child, and they're still around, and they're in every dealership that I go in. Mm-hmm. BP Racing Fuels, beyond you now, since we know each other and we've had discussions, that's the brand that comes to my mind. And I have no idea why. I don't remember if when I was a kid they had commercials on Supercross, or if it's the banners that they have at the racetrack. Do you guys look at a brand that has been essentially their sole focus, and they have been the name in Supercross and Motocross, that of which you're trying to come in now and disrupt, which is why I'm sure they've brought you and your knowledge from Four Wheels. Do you guys look at, hey, what have they done to position themselves in the mind of so many of these amateurs as buy this, and why are all the dealerships having them on the floor? Right. Do you look at that and figure out, okay, what's the game plan that we use to get into the minds of the consumer? Or do you take something that you learned from Four Wheels, completely different than what that competitor might be doing, and utilize that?
I think our strategy is completely different. And there's certainly space in the market for everybody. So like anything, when you have and in fairness, even though, like I say, we were in the two-wheel space, because we want to grow into the four-wheel space in North America, I have to look at everything. And Four-Wheel has, it's everything from, this includes two-wheel too, but drag racing, wheel racing, stock car. When somebody says like, race fuel, think of how many different disciplines there are. Sure. Alone dirt track. They tend to use, more methanol stuff, and we don't get into that. But okay, you have, like any brand, you're starting a brand. Like if you're Pepsi and you've got Coke, or even if you're a startup cola and you've got these two sort of, juggernauts, you look at it and you say, okay, where is there some white space? Where are they not competing? Because to go head to head to an incumbent is always difficult. And the other thing I will say is, our company is, again, because we have this big parent company in Germany in the petrochem space, we are in things like industrial. It's funny, I mean, it was great to see that during the pandemic, some of these fuel companies have made statements about that they're making hand sanitizers. We actually always make hand sanitizer because we make alcohols in our other divisions. So we've done that for over 100 years. We make alcohols. And so, of course, we didn't run an ad about that because that's our normal business. And you don't think to like that it was special right now. I will say, though, one thing that's unique about our relationship within our company's portfolio is we're the only consumer brand. So one of the challenges I've had is they want to grow the business in North America and rest of the world, but there isn't the brand awareness. So like you saying, you've seen banners since you were a kid. Absolutely. And Americans in particular, and it's just the nature of us, we respond to marketing. So a product doesn't even necessarily need to be better. You can have a mediocre product, but if you advertise and say you're the best, after a while,
Perception.
you're the best. Perception absolutely sells product. And so one of the challenges sometimes I will say, you know, our company, one of the things that is fantastic is, I mean, we've got everybody, you know, it's run by a PhD chemist, you know, and everybody else has degrees in chemistry or chemical engineering, extremely bright folks who realistically have, in a lot of ways, have just relied on the quality of the product in the rest of world markets. But this is sort of the thing that I'm bridging, is saying, okay, I get that the product is great, but you got to tell people and you've got to repeat your message and, you know, get banners out. So when you look at the white space of the or when you look at the marketplace, figure out, you know, where you are, where you aren't, and where your competitors are playing. Where's the spot where they aren't? Because that's maybe a good way to get a foothold in something unique. So for instance, one of our strategies is we're actually going into vintage. We've been doing vintage stuff in Europe, but doing it here, both vintage, moto, and four-wheel. Because if you think about a vintage car too, you know, vintage car or bike, you buy it, you maybe restored, or maybe you restore it yourself. You're putting a lot of money into it, and you know, effectively, it's your baby. And so you want to make sure that you're feeding it the right stuff. And for people that do vintage racing, things are kind of delicate. Right. And I think that's a spot where we're gaining some traction and we're going to focus on. But you know, out of the gate, when you look at an existing company that has tons of marketing dollars, it's like going up against Goliath. Mm-hmm. So you kind of stay in your lane and then maybe start merging.
Sure.
You get a little.
What role does new media play in your current strategy or your hopeful strategy in a post-COVID-19 world, right, or 2021? Things like, I see you guys are doing some Google advertising. What role does that play now, and maybe social media advertising in the future, and then partnering with brands like, I know how we met each other with Scott Wallenberg from RacerX. So traditional platforms like RacerX Print, RacerX Digital, things like that. What role in your mind will that play?
Well, I think like anything, when you're looking at when you're developing a brand, because effectively, I mean, I was really kind of starting from scratch, even though the brands existed since 1989, let's call it like starting from zero. Yeah. So like anything, the first year, it's like shotgun blast, you know, and every brand has a life cycle. And so what you do as you kind of progress in the life cycle changes. In the beginning, you kind of just want to be everywhere and you're just kind of getting your logo out. The one thing that has helped, though, is so our CEO had this idea about 1.5 years ago to say, 2 years ago, to say we need to have the ability to sell via e-commerce. And it was a really smart way to kind of also be ready as we are, because we're building a dealer network, and we're not going to be like, to your point where you can kind of go into every shop on the corner and find certain race fuels. We don't have the intention to do that. Definitely more of a boutique brand, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. There's a space for Louis Vuitton and there's a space for Michael Kors, and they can coexist. And, you know, you can go into Macy's and find one, and you can go into Neiman Marcus and find the other. And again, they're both in the business. They both make a ton of money. You know, they both have happy customers. But one of the things that I think was a really great idea that our CEO kind of worked toward was, well, hey, before we get this dealer network, why don't we also work on having an e-commerce solution? Because listen, the United States is huge, and it's bigger than most people in Europe usually realize. Luckily, our CEO, although German, lived in the US for a while. So he fully got, 4 time zones in mainland US, whatever. So how do we it's going to take a while to set up a dealer network. How do you allow it? So what's a way to kind of leapfrog and have your fuel be available and deliverable to people because even once we have the dealer network established, you could still have somebody in northern Idaho who's nowhere near a shop that would sell our stuff. But if he or she wants to use it, great, just order it online. So the kind of fun byproduct of that is we set up this e-commerce site, but then it's like, well, this also needs to be our website where you can then have stories, and you're going to see us in the next few months. You're going to see more video content and whatever, because again, everyone's coming to your doorstep. You need to tell them what you're about and show them. So I think print and digital, and in fairness, RacerX, yes, it's every magazine is this way now, which they have to be, and it's fantastic. It's kind of print and digital. So as a subscriber, you've got this great content visually, but how great when you have that digital version of it, that you're now flipping through ads and you see something that's interesting and you just click right on it and it takes you right to the website. I mean, so it takes you to the website, but now your website has to be ready to, welcome that person in and say, hey, glad you're here. Let's tell you who we are, what we're about, and kind of, that Cooper Webb was using this fuel last season when he won his championship, and this is the fuel he used, but maybe you need this one because you don't need it.
For sure.
And so we're slowly building that. Honestly, we're a small team, so you're going to see more and more of that being added in the coming, months and year. But I think social is great. It's cool. What's great about things like Google and all that is, I sit here like I'm watching the stock ticker, and you can see all the analytics. You can see, where the clicks are coming in from. Don't worry, it's not Big Brother. I don't see that it's, in Topeka, Kansas,
Sure.
But I can see roughly where and how long they're spending. Everybody who has a website obviously knows that this is what you do. You look at how long somebody's on your website for, you look at what pages they're looking at. The best is the feedback of what pages they're not looking at. And then you realize, okay, we got to tweak this. But I think the reality is I still think the answer is all of those media channels. Interestingly though, Facebook used to be a driver. I think it's declined. I think, especially, not to get political, but I think in the most recent political climate, there's people that have opinions about Facebook and Facebook ads. So but it's one of those things too. It is global. So one thing that's interesting, our website is actually only for the US. It's sitting there and it's got a .com address. Right. So we get traffic from all over the world.
Sure.
And we have distributors all over the world. So usually we just get inquiries and we say like, oh, please, talk to your Malaysian distributor. But the content, you're gonna see us widening that out, because again, if you've been lucky enough to get a guest at your door, you have to really capitalize and make sure that you can. The thing too, I want to say what I like, and this is what we did I did at SRT at Fiat Chrysler. When you're lucky enough to work with a niche brand in what's basically people's hobby and love, you are you're grateful, because when people are visiting your site, like even if I send you guys an email and everybody that subscribes to the ETS Racing Fuel newsletter, if we send you a newsletter, you're likely going to open it up. So we'll have a higher open rate than if it's like your bank, right? Because what's more fun to read about? Moto, what happened this weekend in, not this weekend because of COVID, but like what were the results from Redbud? Boom, ETS Racing Fuels has a take. So you're going to open it. But what is nice though, is we can also then build out the website to kind of be a community. Because ideally, I want you to come to our website 5 or 6 times a month. It doesn't mean that you're going to buy fuel every time. And so that was actually one of the things I had to kind of, work with on my colleagues, because they were getting the metrics of like, oh, we've got these people visiting, but they're not buying. I'm like, hold on, any visit is a great visit, and we can create a community and a place where,
you have to be a media company first. I mean, that was, I learned this very, very, very early on in starting my first business, which was a video production company. That no matter what business you are, you have to be a media company first, and then you sell whatever it is. So we're a digital marketing company, but we have shows like this and the business of Moto. We have all these things that people are intrigued by and engaged by, and then they start to know the name, and then they have a reason to come back. And then if they do need something that we offer, we're generally the first person they think of because you're a media company first. And so many people ignore, and it's just because of the digital world we live in. So many people don't want to give in to that. They want to do what they did in 2004 because it worked. And now it's like, you have to understand that kid that was 10 is now 30. And they consume content differently than a 30-year-old did in 2000 and whatever. So
absolutely,
I think that's what you're saying, to where something as invisible and non-sexy in some people's minds as fuel, you're making it sexy, you're making it visible. It's not, these gear companies to where people can see it and they're like, "Ooh, there's that hot new design." It's you have to give people that reason for it to be interesting, and that's what you just said. We want people to come back to our site and open our emails and get our take on Redbud, and I love that. That aligns with exactly what we preach to our clients. So that I think, and
ideally too, I always say, like, if our goal is, I want you to favorite our website. I love that. That the content is good enough that you'll get fuel. And if you trust us, eventually you'll buy fuel. And if you try it and you like our fuel, you're going to tell somebody else that you like the fuel. But how much in a given month can we talk about fuel?
Right. Exactly.
And we know that. So instead, let's talk about other stuff that's fun. But if you have a technical question and you want to know about, like, how to change the map on your bike, or how long can you store the fuel? I mean, we obviously have it all in the frequently asked questions, but still people don't go to that page. And so, they kind of say, hey, this or that. And then you're kind of that trusted resource.
Exactly.
I mean, come for the fuel, stay for the conversation.
I love that. I think there's an amazing slogan for a social media campaign to drive traffic.
Yeah. I mean, because obviously we wouldn't be in it. I mean, if you see obviously everybody has like their favorite form of motorsport, but ultimately we're all in this because we love racing. Racing. I mean, listen, when I was a kid, I used to ride a plastic lawnmower down my driveway because I could get some speed. 4 wheels, any wheels, whatever.
Yeah. Well, guys, we have Beth Paretta on our show today, U.S. Race Fuel Sales Manager for ETS, and again the URL for the ETS site,
ETSRacingFuels.com.
ETSRacingFuels.com. Go there, explore the site. I mean, I'm on the page right now. I mean, go to the ETSRacingFuels.com/pages/championships, and then click on Supercross, Motocross, at least on that. There's several for all the disciplines. And then when you scroll down through and you see, I mean, you're talking.
It's names
2001.
Chad Reed, 2009.
Yes, Chad Reed, 2000. I mean, just a long list.
Yeah.
They didn't just start yesterday. So at least start there on their site. It's interesting what you guys have done, and you're such a brilliant marketing and business mind that I'm excited to see what happens in the next 12 to 24 months. That's
the other thing, is it takes time. That's the other thing. Is you can't. Because again, and remember too, again, your motocross bike is your baby. And so you're going to be careful on making decisions about what you're going to, I mean, it's one thing if it's handlebars, you can swap them out, but fuel, I mean, the engine's the most important thing, right? So you need to trust us, or when you're making a switch, you need to really, it's nothing that you make lightly. You're not making a switch on race day.
Exactly. Well, we appreciate you joining us. I enjoyed this
Thanks
conversation.
so much.
I think a lot of people will get a bunch out of this. So I'm excited for this to go live, and be sure to check out ETSRacingFuels.com. And Beth, we really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Luke. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Moto Marketing Podcast. If your goal is to get real, measurable results from your marketing that will grow your company revenue, then check out how Impakt Media can get the same results that they have for Moto's most iconic brands by visiting thinkimpakt.com. That's THINKIMPAKT.com. Have a marketing question that you want answered on the show? Send your questions to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast.